we get put in positions where we have to do stuff that we really do not want to do. And, I'm not thinking about, paying taxes or putting the bins out here. I'm talking about, you see a lot of stories of people being put under pressure, and they end up living lives that they really don't want to lead. So, I was very fortunate, I think, in hindsight, to get to that point and just go, okay, I'm going to reevaluate what I do, whether I enjoy it, who I associate with, what I do for work, and start to look at, can I make it really good? Can I be excited to get up in the morning and think about what I'm going to do? And that's the kind of good life. I made a lot of changes, some significant changes, and I have nothing to be unhappy about.
Hi there, welcome back to Good for the Hive, a weekly podcast where I get to talk to a whole host of people to learn from their life lessons and see if we can answer the question, what is a good life? This week's episode is with Wray. Chris is a techie, a traveller and a minimalist. He's a remote technology consultant that's doing things a little bit differently. Chris tells me all about his latest projects and passions, including a 10-day Vipassana Retreat, which is solid meditation and zero talking, and his latest project, Fckd and Fckd. If you enjoy the episode, please do hit the like button, and if you're new around here, do subscribe. The more likes and subs that we get, the bigger the guests that we can attract and the more value that we can offer you. Let's jump into the episode. Chris, thank you very much for jumping on the podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
So what we'll do is I'll start this interview as I want to start all of my interviews certainly with new guests, and ask you, what is a good life for you?
It's a really interesting question, and it's always interesting in terms of how should you answer this. I mean, in my mind, life is about balance, so I think irrespective of what you call it, living a good life, living your best life, people talk about work-life balance. I think it's kind of life balance. Whatever you want to kind of call it, I think it's a balance of doing things well and doing the right things, I think, is probably where I come from.
What sort of things do you have to balance, say, in your life, for example?
I think I'm one of these people who got to the point where things weren't balanced, and you re-evaluate everything when you come out of that. So, I worked too hard. I was put in a position where, things I was being asked to do and things that I was doing just generally made me quite unhappy, very unhappy, actually. And, I ended up taking on too much responsibility and generally not having a very nice time. And, that re-evaluation point is where you start to think, what does a good life look like? And starting to say, do I enjoy this or do I not like it? And I think, particularly today, we get put in positions where we have to do stuff that we really do not want to do. And, I'm not thinking about, paying taxes or putting the bins out here. I'm talking about, you see a lot of stories of people being put under pressure, and they end up living lives that they really don't want to lead. So, I was very fortunate, I think, in hindsight, to get to that point and just go, okay, I'm going to reevaluate what I do, whether I enjoy it, who I associate with, what I do for work, and start to look at, can I make it really good? Can I be excited to get up in the morning and think about what I'm going to do? And that's the kind of good life. I made a lot of changes, some significant changes, and I have nothing to be unhappy about. I lead a good life now.
Fantastic. Was there one straw that broke the camel's back? Was there a rock bottom? Was there a point that you can reference that you think, right, that was actually when I knew things had to change? Were you suffering mentally, physically? Was there something significant that happened to you?
Yeah, I, it's the point, and we started this kind of like meeting in terms of the background for minimalism and that change of life. I think the year that I kind of really made all of those changes, I'd started looking into minimalism. I'd started getting rid of a lot of stuff. I'd started feeling better having done so. My mental health did go off the rails. I was really quite depressed. And, one of the things that they say about people who suffer from poor mental health is when they recover, and I was very lucky that I didn't have a particularly bad period of this, but they reevaluate everything. And that was me. That was absolutely me. Everything, my relationships, the amount of time I spent with, so-called friends. I took a real good look at everything that I was doing and just stopped doing the things that were unpleasant. And, it upset a few people here and there. And, they have an expectation of, well, you used to do this. And I just go, no, I don't want to do it anymore. So it
sounds like there's a few toxic relationships.
Yeah. I wouldn't say toxic, but I don't think there were really very deep or very close relationships. So, I think it's a lot. There's a bit of fair weather friends. I'm very lucky. Some of my closest friends I've known since I was 11 years old, and we are still as close now as we were when we were 11 years old. So there were a couple of really, really close friends. But I think for me, that point was, I lived in this massive 5-bedroom house. I had the sports cars and the double garage and all of the things that you aspire to. And I had them all. And I sat in my enormous study staring at all the crap on these shelves and thinking, God, is this it? And, it's really cliched and you see it in the books. But that was me. I was really unhappy. I was really, really unhappy.
I was talking to someone yesterday who said you'll never find a Buddhist monk who'll go to someone who's really wealthy and ask them for advice. It's more likely to be the other way around, where someone's deeply unhappy with all this wealth around them, and they might go and try and seek out some spiritual teacher to teach them how to be happy in amongst all this stuff that they don't need, don't want, and don't care about, really.
Yeah, that was me a couple of weeks ago. I did the Vipassana meditation retreat. So, yeah.
How many days is
90 plus hours of meditation. 10 days of not talking to your fellow students and 90 plus hours of meditation. Quite an adventure.
That's so strange. I've never heard of this, and in the space of 2 days, I've spoken to 2 people who have done that exact thing, and they said after about 3 or 4 days, it's just hell. 3 or 4 days, everyone's thinking, I can't do this, I need to get out of there. But then by day 10, everyone's very peaceful and very tuned into themselves. How did you find that experience?
How did I well, I was my significant other. She said, I brought you this gift for Christmas. So you're off on the 3rd of January and you're going to this. I knew nothing about it. I've practiced meditation for years, but probably no more than, like 30 minutes ago. And so I read up on it, and it really is a thing. And I was super fortunate to be able to get in. There are queues and queues of people. The one in Thailand is booked up for years in advance. But they had spaces here in Cambodia, so off I went. And, they tell you I think it's day 2 and day 6 are the ones that they lose people. You're not supposed to leave. The idea is if you're going, you're committed, you're going to do the whole 10 days. We did lose a couple of people on day 2, but yeah, it's work. It's work. But it was, I got a lot out of it at the end, but it was work. It's not It's not sit and relax and not do anything. You have to be completely involved in the whole process.
No, she described it as 4 a.m., get up, 10 hours of meditation every single day, no talking, no yoga, no journaling, no interactions of any sort, really. Can you see the other
No.
participants that are in amongst it? Or you...
Yes, you. So the ladies are split up from the men, and there's like a fence down the middle of the retreat to avoid distraction. It's an interesting way to describe it. But yeah, you're not allowed any eye contact, any hand gestures with the idea is that the whole experience is based on you and you alone. So it's not about something you've read, something you've seen. It's about your own experience, and so you have to go through the whole process in order to experience it. But the only time that you see anybody else is in the meditation room. It's half of it is ladies and half of it is gentlemen, but you have your eyes shut the entire time. So, yeah.
My first thought was to food. Is food provided and left on a tray outside your door, and you just go and without seeing someone, it's just magically there, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you do have meal times. You do get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's vegetarian. And it's simple. And in Cambodia, it's rice for breakfast, rice for lunch, and rice for dinner. And, I had to cut down on my rice in the end because it was like not doing my innards any good. But I lost 2 kilos while I was there. So,
nice.
And
handy byproduct.
I've taken a really super byproduct. I'm very pleased about that actually, because that's it's one of my other challenges this year.
And which days did you find personally the hardest?
I think I was about number 6. I think it's a lot of hours of meditation, and your subconscious really starts to have fun with your mind, because if you're concentrating on the meditation as you should be, your subconscious is going, I haven't spoken to you for 6 days. What's going on here? Think about this. Have this as a distraction. Have that as a distraction. And I had some of the weirdest things crop up from things in my childhood.
Can you share any of those? So it's almost is it almost trying to save you a little bit and say, no, you don't have to do this. We've got other options here. There's a little bit of entertainment that I can come up with if you need it.
I think that's what your subconscious is doing. It's going, I'm not getting the attention I normally get. So how about this? I'll serve you this thought. Have something from your childhood. Have something completely abstract. Have 3 scenarios from the future, none of which are ever likely to actually happen. And I wasn't the only one, apparently, to have this strange... But your subconscious is trying to distract you from concentrating on having a clear mind. So, yeah, super weird. Very, very difficult to describe. I'm not sure it's come across, but yeah, like something out of a movie, I think. But
you walked out after 10 days and you thanked your significant other.
Yeah, it's it's a great story. There's all sorts of. I spent. She said, "What's it like?" And I went, "How long have you got for me to explain to you?" The meditation piece, the place that you're at, the weirdness going through your head, what other people think. On the 10th day, you do get half a day, if you like, of being able to talk to your fellow students, because they said just releasing people without having said a single word in 10 days, their partners, their significant others and families, just wondered what on earth was going on, because you don't have a lot to say when you're done. But yeah, I would recommend it if that's your bag and you can do the whole 10 days. I would give it a go. It's a very unusual experience, very difficult to describe, but some people have seen super results. I've been super productive since I got back, and they did say, this is one of the side effects, if you like. So, yeah.
Really interesting. So going back to the minimalism side of things, so Was that one of the first changes that you made, that you started to realize that your associations with stuff weren't helping you out?
Yeah, it was, I think, I was very fortunate. I had a really good job. I was paid very well. And so as a consequence, I lived in a decent house. I had all the trappings of someone who's paid well. Um, but I, but you don't actually need the stuff. And that was the point I got. You look at the shelf, and I looked at the bookshelf in front of me. It was full of all these books. And in fairness, I'd read most of them, but why was I keeping them? I could just have a Kindle with the majority of them on there. The tech stuff. How many hard drives do you really need? How many other bits and pieces? So I just gradually started selling stuff off. Then I started clearing out my wardrobe. Then I started looking at digital clutter. And it kind of went on from there. And eventually I changed quite a lot of my life. So, I worked for a reasonable sized organization. But I think I was lucky. We were all made redundant. They rocked up one day and they said, that's it, shut the doors, turn the lights out, last one out, put the cat out, and off we all went. And I think for me, that was quite a nice turning point, because I just went, I think I'm done now. Now I've been managing hundreds of people. I decided to take up consulting contracting to start. I was very fortunate. A friend of mine introduced me to my first contract. And it kind of went a bit broader than that. I got divorced. I don't think that had anything to do with the minimalism, but it's that reevaluation. I don't think we were heading in the same direction. It's very amicable, thankfully. And my stepfather died the same year, and I think that also hit me quite hard as well. And again, I think it's back to the sort of evaluation of, you look at his life and you look at mine. He really was not happy towards the end. And so, it's back to that reevaluation thing. But, it sounds a bit morbid and, sounds a bit awful. But actually, it was really good for me in terms of, you take a really good look at stuff and go, is this making me happy? Can I do this long term? And a lot of the things that I was doing were not sustainable. So I changed them. So I think I summarized it once as saying, I changed everything but the children. I moved house, I changed my job, I got rid of all my stuff, I changed what I did for work. I changed pretty much everything, I think.
And did this go hand in hand with your decision to move away from the UK at this point and become a digital nomad?
No, that was completely random. No, the move to Cambodia. So, a few years beyond this, I met someone, still with her, but she had lost her job, and so she was looking for another one. And she worked in the development sector, worked for an NGO, and she came home one day and said, I've applied for this random job in Cambodia. And it was like, that was that. We didn't think much more of it. And she got an interview, and then she got another interview. And then one Friday evening, she came home and she said, that random job in Cambodia, the one I didn't think I'd get, I didn't think would pay, I didn't think all the reasons why she didn't think she'd get it. And she said, can we talk about it? And I was, at the time, sort of wriggling to get out of an IT director role that I was contracted for. They want me to become a full-time employee, and I wasn't particularly keen on that idea. I think I'd done about as much as I could within that organisation. So it was a great excuse for me to go, I'm so sorry, but I can't renew, I can't, continue in this because I'm going to Cambodia. And off we went.
Was there a danger at that point of you slipping back into a life that you were trying slightly to get away from?
No, not a chance, I don't think. the comparison between what we were doing in London and what we do here in Cambodia, they're poles apart. I think not only the culture and the environment, but the work that we do is now completely different, even than when we first arrived here.
So this opportunity came along just at the right time.
It was I should have done this sort of thing in my 20s, but there I was in my 40s doing the same thing, and it's like that's fine, and it's become a bit of a theme. I think I'm still doing things now I should have done or should be doing in my 20s.
Is there one thing or aspect about your life now that you wish you'd have realized way back when? You're like, it's so obvious looking back on it, but now I've figured it out.
Yeah, I really should have worked outside of the UK much sooner. I mean, I was really fortunate when I was in my kind of corporate role. I did do a lot of travel. I worked in the US and Southeast Asia and Europe. Superb. It's absolutely superb. It really does broaden the mind. Going to different countries, working in a different style, having to have that open-mindedness, language, culture. I was really lucky. So coming here wasn't too much of a jump for me.
Is there something innate?
I think that's the only thing I should have done sooner, and learning other languages. Because
how many languages do you speak now?
I speak English. I speak a little bit of Khmer, which is Cambodian language. But I started picking up my French because I need to improve on my French. I just wish I'd done it all sooner.
Really?
My other half is Czech. I can understand most Czech stuff. I can get by when I go to Czech when I'm on my own. But I don't really speak a lot of Czech. It's a super complex language to learn. And again, I just wish I'd learned languages and travelled a lot sooner.
Really? Do you feel in your previous busier lifestyle there just wasn't a capacity to think about learning another language, let alone going out and doing it? Or there just wasn't a need?
I did actually take Mandarin lessons in work when we were dealing with some of the Chinese customers. Because in China, no one understands English. In terms of, as soon as you step outside the hotel, you would have to give your directions to the taxi driver, and the guy, kind of opening the door and letting you in the taxi. He would give the taxi driver the address written in Mandarin because no one speaks English, and that's a lot of fun. So my Mandarin's pretty poor. I know enough words to kind of get me by, but yeah, it's super fun when you can't speak the language. Super fun. I think everyone should have a go at this.
That's the good thing with going on a 10-day retreat when no one's talking to you. You can be in Thailand and not need it in the slightest.
Yeah.
So is there one thing about the Cambodian lifestyle and culture that just chimes with you that little bit better than the way we do things, let's say in London and in the States?
I think it's a love-hate relationship. And that's nothing to do with the Cambodians as people. They're super lovely, most of them, but it's the education system here is awful, and so as a consequence, there's very little thinking for yourself. There's if I hate going to the bank. Because if I go, I have to go 4 times, because you'll arrive. I need to change this, and then they'll say, "Oh, did you bring your passport?" And you go, "But you didn't tell me to bring my passport. I've got my card. Isn't that enough?" No. So you go back and you go and get your passport, and then you rock up again. And you go, "Okay, I've got my passport now. Can I change this?" And they go, "Oh, can you prove where's the letter that we gave you for what letter?" Oh, the pack. It's in the pack we gave. Well, why didn't you tell me that in the last? It's that sort of thing that drives you crazy. But you start to learn, if you're lost and you ask someone, where am I going? To ask three people and take the average answer, because in Asian culture, quite often they will give you a wrong answer rather than not giving you an answer and losing face. And so you have to, put this in context. But the weather's fantastic.
Pretty impressed. Are they always pretty impressed when you come out with some? Was it Khmer? Sorry, the language.
So I don't use my Khmer much. I use it in the tuk-tuks, and I learned it mostly because I used to go to the market and I used to buy my kind of fruit and veg at the local market, and there's almost no English spoken there. And you need to know how much stuff is and the usual sort of bits and pieces. So I did take Khmer lessons, but it's a super simple language to learn. So we got to grips with it pretty quickly, but it's only when you go into the countryside that people really speak to you in Khmer, because in Phnom Penh, we've spent a lot of time with students and young people. The population is extremely young, and they need to speak English in order to go to university. So pretty much, everybody speaks English in the big cities. So. But it's useful, super useful.
And moving on slightly to something that I found on your website, that you're quite passionate about morning routines and habits that you get into and that are really helpful. Could you talk us through your morning routine and how it is now and how it's changed over the years?
Yes. So it's really interesting because you reminded me that I've written about this on my blog, and I had to go back and look at, God, has it changed that much since? And I've just done a video for my new experimental channel, and I'll talk about that later, about writing morning pages. So my morning routine hasn't changed that much since I've been here. I'm self-employed now, thankfully. Occasionally I do go to the very early meeting, but most of the time I never use an alarm clock. It's fantastic. We're not that far from the equator, so the sun comes up at 6 and the sun goes down at 6 every day. And so you don't really need an alarm clock. As the sun comes up, it lightens up the room. I have a cat now. The cat will wake me up as soon as the sun comes up. So I don't use an alarm clock anymore. And then
now you're incredibly fortunate, because all it would take is a significant other that doesn't like waking up at 6 a.m. or and you get thick blinds, and then you're back to having an alarm clock in your life. So is your partner's really up at the same time, or your partner has shades on or something?
Well, I think it's interesting because when we go to Europe, it's cold. And the tendency when we're back in Europe is to lie in because it's cold and it's dark, in the winter. So yeah, it's quite interesting what you get used to. But in terms of routine, it's not changed a huge amount. I'm generally up first. I'll feed the cat, let the cat out, and then I'll make coffee. I'm pretty much an addict, if I'm honest. So I'll take my first cup of coffee, and I will go and sit outside on the terrace. We're very fortunate here. We're on the 3rd floor. There's a reasonable sized terrace overlooking the Royal Palace and the University of Fine Arts. So we have a nice view. And then I will sit with my coffee and I will write morning pages. And the cat will start to get fed up with me sat there and not giving the cat attention. So the cat will sit on the morning pages as I'm writing. Have you heard of morning pages?
I have not. So this is something I wanted to inquire with you. So firstly, how was the retreat 10 days of not having your morning coffee?
They give you this terrible 3-in-1. So this is the book, The Artist's Way. It's one of the exercises. My better half used to give me lots of experiments, and the book is, Julia Cameron's book is full of experiments. For example, morning pages is one of them. 3 pages of streaming consciousness written by hand. But there are other exercises. There's disconnecting from the media, news. There's taking yourself out on an artistic date, and so on and so forth. So I tried all of them. The morning pages stuck.
It's
The
called
book
The
is called
Artist's
The
Way.
Artist's Way.
Is it directed to people trying to be more creative or having some sort of writer's block, or is it?
It is the subtitle is A Course in Discovering and Recovering Your Creative Self. And it's not specifically for artists. It's for people who kind of want to achieve, if you want, who have some sort of creative, but it doesn't necessarily need to be artistic creativeness. It could be, you have a project or you have something you want to achieve or whatever. It's all kind of targeted at just kind of planting a seed, to grow your creativeness through some of these exercises. But morning
Do you find
pages
you start the same way each time, or it's literally just first thing off your head?
It's first thing off my head. It's really interesting. I'm editing the video that pretty much answers all of these questions that will go up on my other channel.
Send me the link when you're done. I'll link it in the description below, so people can just skip this bit.
But it's always the same when when you edit stuff. So I started this new YouTube channel. It's called. You might have to beep this. It's called 50 and Fckd, and it's an idea I've had in my mind.
50 and Fckd.
It's not spelt like that, but it's the
You've
idea.
Got no asterisks in there to.
No, I just shortened it because it makes the URL easier. But it's the premise behind it is I've had this idea for years. I wrote the idea on a boat between here and Laos. It was 3 or 4 hours on this boat, and I had nothing better to do. And I went, I've got this idea, in that men of a certain age, life changes in terms of your health, in terms of your fitness, in terms of your mindset. The kids grow up and leave, and I'm really hats off. I do a lot of work with women entrepreneurs and whatever. But I started thinking, I don't know of anyone who's kind of pushing the men. And so my grandmother lived till she was 101. And so you kind of think if you get to the point that you're 50, you've still got another 50 years to go. But things have changed a lot. So I just thought of putting this channel together about, men and their mindset and how they should keep healthy and what they should do. And, because you see so many men, they get to this kind of, 60s, 70s, and they give up and retire and sadly don't live very long. So my thinking is, I'd like to be the first man to live to 150. Is there something that we can give men at this age, some sort of resource, some ideas about, how they can live their best lives? So that's my kind of new challenge. And so the Vipassana meditation was kind of challenge number one in experimenting on myself. So
Interesting.
I have had more ideas on this. So
I wonder how many people that are in that generation that are either 50 now or just turned 50 would even come across certain things like morning pages, like 10-day retreats of not talking to people. Well, you're obviously part of that generation, and in about 6 days I'll be 40 and Fckd, and be changing the title of my one.
But it's a similar thing. There's a book title. I'm not sure who the author is, but the title kind of says it all. Is what got you here won't get you there, or something along those lines. And my good lady is a follower of Trini, as in Trini and Susanna from the UK TV stuff. And in the US there's Mel Robbins, and there are others, and they're very focused on women of this age and supporting women of this age. But there's not much in the way of men supporting men. So I think there's a little bit of a gap, and men can be a real nuisance sometimes. We just get a bit stuck in our ways in terms of, we've always done it this way and things are fine. But the world is changing beyond recognition, and so we have to change with it. and if we are going to live to 100, 150, we're going to have to change our ways and become fitter and healthier and keep our mind active and look after ourselves. There are some people who are of this mindset and they've totally got it. And there are others who, they think I'm mad. What do you mean? What do you mean? You're crazy. So, yeah, I think there will be more and more of an audience for this sort of thing. I think, I start
and as
to
those
hear
generations
lots of
go
podcasts
into
about. Yeah, longevity is a real subject right now. There's lots of research in it, but we've got to look after ourselves. We are responsible for ourselves, and it would have been nice, I think, a few years ago when I was 50 to have, had someone to kind of model this on. But it's relatively new. So, yeah. So I thought
well, that's it.
that's my challenge for this year.
We get to a certain age and we stop thinking about personal development and self-progression and all the rest of it, and then you start thinking, how do I teach this to someone else, and what do I wish I had when I was looking at that? And that's very much the genesis for this YouTube channel, to be honest. I was speaking to an accountant friend of mine, and he was looking after one of his clients was a stockbroker from the city, very, very wealthy, lots of success, did the usual thing, retired in 60, 65, and then just gave up, didn't have that discipline anymore, completely imploded. And he said, if you saw him on the street now, you think you'd be buying the big issue from him. And he's lost his marriage, and he's just lost that whole sense of self and what to do with himself, and just completely just gave up. And it's just like there is no second half. It's just that's it, done. I've worked as hard as I possibly can until 60 odd, and then done. And no plan of what to do next. Absolute zero.
No. And, if you read the research and the reports, is men are not very good at, they're at maintaining their own social networks, and that is, a group of friends or, sports interests or a mechanism to give them that support, because in quite a lot of the research that I've read, the social aspects of this is quite often managed, controlled. I'm not sure what the right word is, but it's generally the woman in the relationship who has more of those connections. And so, if you lose your wife or you lose your partner, it's all of those connections are gone with it. So I think it's super important for men to be aware of this and to maintain some sort of social network, even if it's just meeting random strangers. We're all thinking along the same lines. We can all support each other, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Ricky Gervais who said when you've got an elderly couple, if the guy goes first, then the woman's sort of down to 20 years of pottering around the house, and if the woman goes first, then the guy's just done. He's just done. He doesn't know how to do anything anymore, and it's just like, just stop.
Yeah, and as men, I think we have to change. It's a bit, it's just too old fashioned, and there's lots of people who are making those changes, and there's lots of research into longevity and simple stuff that you can do at home without spending huge amounts of money to stay healthy, to keep your mind active, to live longer.
Have you looked
and,
into
live a good life while you're doing it? Yeah.
Thanks for bringing us back to topic. Have you looked into Dr. Peter Attia at all and the work he's doing on longevity and the sort of books he's putting out there?
The name rings a bell, but there are so many people now. They're looking at all sorts of. I think that the kind of bit that changed for me is someone was talking about research, and because aging isn't an illness, there were some strange rules about research and funding and all the other bits and pieces. And so no one could ever find any funding to do research. And there was a change, I think, between sort of 5 and 10 years ago. And whereby, and I think the switch was in the US first, but I think it's changed in other countries as well, whereby there are grants and the availability of public and private funding now to look into this stuff, whereas before there was never any funding available. So I think that the timing of that has also helped. But I listen to Tim Ferriss and Mr. Uberman and others. Who's the guy in the UK? Dr. Raj Chatterjee, I think is his name.
Oh, okay.
All looking into longevity and lifestyle change and all the other bits and pieces, and how we can help ourselves instead of kind of turning to the medical profession for stuff we can actually fix ourselves. We just need the information.
So longevity is getting a bit sexier when it comes to funding, and then they'll finally look into it.
Yeah, but it's you could start looking at. I read a book a couple of weeks ago about the blue zones. There's one in Costa Rica, one in Japan, and people just have, the lifestyles and the diets and the social networks and the food stuffs, the healthy diet that they need, and they live a long time. But at the moment, it's they're very small areas, and we can learn a lot from this. So that's my plan: be the first man to be 150.
There you go. I might be around to have a conversation with you when you're there. Maybe not. So going back to the morning pages.
There'll be lots of people. Yeah, sorry, back to the morning pages. We drifted a lot.
Slight tangent. A very interesting topic area, though. But the 3 pages that you write, I'm always just interested on what these look like, because I know about these things, I read about them, but actually implementing them and, like you say, making them stick. Whereas you read that the artist's way, and this is the one thing that stuck for you. So you've been doing that ever since. So these 3 pages, once you're done with them, are they into the shredder? Are they of any use to you, or is it literally just download what's on your mind and then done?
No, I have volumes of them. Oh, there. This is a blank one, but this is a thick book. If you look at my Instagram account from a year ago, maybe a bit long, I have a stack of these things. That I keep them, and I like to go back and reread some of them. The patterns and the themes. Again, I put it in this video. It's my other half laughs at me. She found it first. It's the same themes. There are some things that stick. I worry about money. I've no idea why. I'm okay. I worry about productivity. Have I done enough? Did I use the time wisely? Have I wasted any time? I get time anxiety if I'm not kind of making some achievements along the way. And then I worry about my weight. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And, I use the analogy of Bridget Jones's diary. She used to put down the number of cigarettes she used to smoke in a day, whereas me, I still track my weight. I'm doing okay right now. I'm 2 kilos off my target. But it's funny. And you look at stuff and you kind of go, is it good to keep an eye on your weight? Absolutely. I put on lots of weight at some points in my life, but I'm okay. I go swimming every day now. My worries about productivity. Well, yeah, I've read every productivity book there is, and I've applied most of the themes. I'm not a Notion consultant for nothing, and there are some things that I'll always write about my productivity or lack of it, and I'll always write about my weight.
So it allows you to go back and realize what's going on in the back of your head, having these morning pages. What else does it give you? Is it a case of getting these things out of your head? Is that where the benefit comes in for you?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. If you think a lot, there's a lot of noise up here sometimes. And for me, getting it all out on paper first thing in the morning it's almost as if you do the brain dump and you can leave it there if you like. You can go back and read it later if you want to, but you can leave it there and it's done. Was it David Allen was saying that, your mind is for thinking up ideas, not for storing them. And so if you get all the ideas out on paper, it gives you you feel sort of a weight off. You feel freed up, or at least certainly I do, to get on with the day, knowing that I've cleared my mind. Tim Ferriss referred to morning pages as his emotional windshield wipers. So, I think everybody has a slightly different slant on it, but it's the same sort of thing. Put all your thoughts in there. No one has to read it if you don't want to. Share it,
Oh,
and away you go. You get on with the day. But I really like looking at the patterns, because I think sometimes we're a bit too focused on the future and achieving, and we fail to kind of take a turn around and look at where we come from and how far we've come. And I think for some of us, me particularly, we don't acknowledge, what we've achieved along the way. We're still focused on, bigger and better and more exciting goals, I think, sometimes. So it's good to look around. And, some of the big issues that we've seen, this big issue today, it's really bothering me, it's really important and whatever. And you can go back and read through your morning pages a year later and go, gosh, what was I so worried about? It's like, I can hardly remember that now. So, yeah, I find them really good to just dump your thoughts that are in your head onto the pages, close the book, and away you go.
why do you think they've turned into morning pages and not evening pages? Because I find a lot of things that are bubbling away in my head. I don't lose a lot of sleep, but when I do, it'll usually be because of that. And usually the sleep is a way of sort of untangling some of that mess. So I wake up a little bit clearer than when I went to sleep. So is there an argument that have you ever done them in the evening to help you out and clear your mind?
I've tried once or twice. I think it depends on our own personal preferences. I'm definitely a morning person. So this morning, I was up at 4:30 for some bizarre reason. Chest was wheezing a bit, I think because the cat probably slept on my pillow next to me. I'm a morning person. I have to switch off in the evening. I'm not very good late at night. I can't really do late calls beyond sort of like 10 p.m. I start to get tired and lose focus. And I think it's just a personal preference, where I know some people, that's when they have their ideas. So I think it's probably personal preference. I think what works for you, might not necessarily work for me, but the principles are the same. I think it's like any sort of time management. Some people can't get out of bed in the morning and certainly don't want to do stuff. And whereas me, I'm more motivated in the morning to do stuff than at any other point in the day. So, yeah, personal preference, I think. Would you agree?
I don't think I am a morning person, but I desperately want to be. I can see so many benefits from it. When I do it, it feels great. But funnily enough, I came back from a holiday to Thailand just before Christmas, and I've struggled because of the cold in England, because of so many different factors, just getting back into that sort of 5:30 alarm clock. We need an alarm clock here. We don't see the daylight until 8 a.m. if you're lucky. But yeah, I really want to get back into those early morning wake ups and just being productive before anyone, 2.5 hours before anyone else's alarm goes off. It just makes you feel great.
Yeah, there was one of those turning points for me. I took myself off on holiday to Hawaii. It's in the middle of nowhere, smack bang in the middle of the Pacific. And, you get up in Hawaii and you do a whole load of work and everyone's still asleep. It's fantastic. And you kind of think, I've done half a day's work on my own. No one's disturbed me. The phone hasn't rung. There's been no messages, no new emails. And I just thought, this is awesome. And so that's when I really started kind of making sure that I was up relatively early, but sitting down and doing something in order to get ahead by the time, people start coming into their office in the UK at 9 a.m. It's probably earlier now. But yeah, I just felt there's, I had an advantage to being able to get stuff done before other people even get out of bed. And I think that's what I like about being here in Southeast Asia, is a lot of my clients are in the UK and the US. I can get up, do stuff in the morning, and they won't get up until sort of middle of the afternoon. So I do feel at an advantage. I can get up, do the work, go swimming, do some content, and they still haven't got out of bed yet. There is that kind of
I do love
good
all
feeling
things
that comes with
productivity, and
it.
you describe yourself as a productivity nerd, I think, in at least one of your blogs. And the reason that this isn't a productivity channel is, one, there's a character a social media guy in England called Ali Abdaal who does it so
We
well,
know
and
Ali
I'm not even going to
Abdaal.
try.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he does it so well. I'm not even going to try and compete with what he's able to do. But the other sort of side of the coin was, it's all right. It's all well and good being productive, but firstly, the hours back that you gain from being so productive. One, do you know what you want to do with those hours? And two, are you being productive in the right field? Are you doing what you actually want to be doing? Are you at the bottom of the ladder that you want to be climbing? So I almost thought that looking at a good life, and it's all great being productive, as long as you know what you're going to do with the extra time that you've gained back and you're being productive in a field that you really want to do. That's what's slightly more pressing for me in my life at the moment, and making sure that's where I am. So for you, and we're sort of leaning into purpose a little bit now, do you feel that you've found your purpose? Do you need a purpose? Is the social media and the creative content that you create, to use create too many times, is that where you're even smiling just thinking about this question? Like, where do you see your purpose at the moment?
Like I said, this is not one question. This is an entire, this is an entire course, an
Mm-hmm.
entire year's worth of podcasting. I think is. I
Mm-hmm.
I think I should bring up a couple of. You've raised a couple of really really good points. Is, what are we being productive for? Because there's a phrase that I picked up, I think last year, toxic productivity. With this very point that you raise is, are you spending your time doing the right things? I was talking to a very close friend of mine yesterday. Again, I've known him since I was 11. He's my age also. And we were just chatting idly about this, that, and the other. And he said, how are you? What's happening? And I said, well, I think I might need bigger goals, because I seem to have almost completed all the stuff that I had planned for January. And he started laughing. And I said, what are you laughing about? He said, well, I don't suppose you noticed, but before that you said, while I was sat by the pool, I was thinking about, and I'd failed to even recognize this, but I told him while I was sitting by the pool, I'm very fortunate. I get to swim in an open air pool every day. I did it this morning. And you're absolutely spot on. Is I, this toxic productivity is doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff, whereas I think more about, it's there's a finite amount of time, so with that time that I have, am I spending it doing things that constitute this good life that we talk about? So I see as much value from sitting on a lounger by the pool reading a book as working on a client's project, because you have to, back to the point that we made right at the very beginning, is you have to have this balance. And I even did an activity within my business. So I mostly work on my own. Occasionally I have a bit of help. But I started to look at, what am I doing with the hours in the day? I was starting to feel a bit burnt out towards the end of last year. And you kind of go, where's my time going? What am I doing? And you'll be amazed what we think is important. But I switched my focus to concentrating on client revenue. So essentially, opening and closing new projects for clients, concentrating on core work, which is actually doing the work for them, which I really enjoy, I should point out. I absolutely love working with my clients. And then creating content. And then, this whole relaxation, watching movies, taking photographs. I don't consider a lot of the content creation as work. I enjoy it. I used to do it anyway when I had spare time. So, you raise a lot of really interesting points here that, you have to think about, is what I'm doing I have the phrase of, is what I'm doing moving the needle? Is it improving my health? Is it improving my relationships? Is it improving the way that I work? Is it decreasing the amount of hours I work? Do I get to be creative? Do I get to have a good time? And all of that really interesting stuff. And it's, I worked with some clients on productivity a few years ago, and the first thing I always asked them to do was track your time. Track it for a week, then track it for a month, and just look at what you're actually doing, and then asking, is that moving the needle on what you class as important in life? And you'd be amazed, at the stuff that we do that we think is important, and it isn't. It absolutely is not important. So, yeah,
So
sorry, that
I
was
spoke
a
to
very
a
long,
no.
kind of circular answer.
No, it's really good. I was speaking to an entrepreneur called Monish the other day, and he actually had quite a contrasting view to your own, which one that I don't necessarily agree with. That we're built and we think life is all going to be nice and easy, and we only we can pick and choose the things that we do. And he was much more strict and disciplined. Of like, no, you have to get up and do the things that you don't want to do, and life's not always going to be that nice. I'm not sure I ascribe to exactly what he's talking about. Have you managed to eliminate a lot of the things you don't enjoy doing? Like you say, paying taxes, taking the bins out, you have to do these things. But all
Yeah,
the
absolutely,
tasks
yeah.
that you've identified that aren't essential, they aren't bringing you joy, have you managed to get rid of them? And do you have a way of identifying them and then equally eliminating them?
Yes, I have eliminated quite a lot of the stuff. It's really fascinating. So in my consultancy, I do technology and tools, and I help generally small and medium-sized businesses automate or put in technology to help them be more efficient so that they have more time, or they make more money, or they can do things faster. And then I went off to work for I shouldn't name them, but I went to work for a very large development organisation, an international development organisation, and they were so inefficient. And there's me sat doing the things for them that I show other small and medium-sized businesses how to get rid of. It's just the irony is just amazing. Here I am doing the things that I hate for this organization because they're so big and they're so, secure, and they don't like change, and they'll only work with these 40-year-old Microsoft pieces of software, and so on and so forth. And the irony was not lost on me. So, that is my view, is why are you doing this? And people go, well, we have to. No, you don't. Invoicing, accounting, all of that sort of stuff. I have a small client, and their process is overwhelming. I can't, for the life of me, fathom out why they would want to spend so much time pushing these pieces of paper around, where they could just put technology in, and they wouldn't even need to think about it again. So I think I'm losing my thread now. Maybe I'm going off at a tangent here, so maybe you'll have to bring me back. But
No, that's good. It's good. It's good. I will touch briefly. So we're getting towards the end of the hour now. So I won't keep you too much longer. I know it's getting later in Cambodia.
it's
Performance-wise,
fine. It's
bar
fine.
reading. Oh, thanks. Bar reading, Getting Things Done by David Allen, which is my first go-to if anyone wants to get into the world of productivity, and it's had the biggest impact on my ways of working, bar none. Bar reading that book, what would be your first step that you would tell someone to get a little bit more productive in their own lives?
Yeah, it was interesting because in the notes you said for someone who's 18, and I found that quite difficult. So the, I'll give multiple answers here. I hope that's okay. But
Yeah.
the book I've most given is Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week. I read that book while I was in Hawaii, and I was gobsmacked at the end of it. Is there are, it's the foundations of my business. I automate and systematize, and help other people do the same. That's the core of my business. But I was amazed that there are these people who have automated absolutely everything and have the idea behind it. And that was just, it blew my mind to think that there are people who actually do this. I mean, no one really works 4 hours a week, but it was the principle of, you don't need to do this stuff. You can systematize and automate and just not worry about some of this stuff, and it doesn't break. So the 4 Hour Work Week is probably my most gifted book. But, for someone who's a bit younger, and 18 is that really difficult age. Is you're an adult, but you just finished. You don't really have that huge amount of life experience purely because of your age. I started thinking about Oliver Birkin's 4,000 Weeks, which is here on my shelf.
That is on my to listen list on Audible. I've not listened to it yet. Good. So please, if you have a summary of that would be great to know. So it's worth a listen.
It's a non-productivity book. It's back to the point that you raised earlier about, are we doing the right things with the time that we have? And it comes at it. The book is written from that angle, and I won't give anything away because it's a really good read. So Oliver Burkeman's book, 4,000 Weeks, is probably my recommendation, for someone who is 18, who wants to think about, what should I be doing in my life? Because it plants a load of seeds in terms of questions you might want to ask. And it's really interesting because I did put David Allen's Getting Things Done, because that was one of the first books that I read. It's super old now. But for anyone who doesn't know the basics of productivity,
massively applicable. Still.
Yeah, it's absolutely the foundation of productivity and how to build the system. I don't think it steers you in the what to do, but it certainly steers you in the how to do it and the systems to put in place to manage it.
Dead. My partner always says when we need to do X, Y, and Z at the weekend, I'll just say capture it. Telling me is not capturing it. We need to capture it somewhere. If we don't capture it, we're going to forget, and then we'll kick ourselves in 3 weeks' time.
I've tried all of those. I've built web pages and forms and all the other bits and pieces. My other half, not playing your game. So yeah,
she's too wily for that. But yeah, the interesting thing about thinking about an 18-year-old is it's not just like you say, they don't have life experience. There's a hell of a lot to come, hopefully. But it's also that generational thing. So an 18-year-old now is very different to when I was an 18-year-old, is very different potentially, well, maybe similar to when you were an 18-year-old. And the new generations that are coming up, they have different challenges for one, but even within themselves, there are generational changes that are happening. One of the things I do on the side is I do a bit of mentoring for people who are having job interviews, because in a previous life I worked for the Royal Household, and we were having this new generation come in and look even for entry-level jobs, and their soft skills and their basic qualities to do a good interview were just not there. It was borderline embarrassing to even talk to them, because you knew they were intelligent, you knew they were nervous, they were in the Royal Household, but they just couldn't express themselves. They couldn't build that connection with someone just by eye contact, because sometimes they couldn't even look you in the eye, or the handshake was terrible, etc. And so it sort of led me to think, okay, it's not just an 18-year-old, it's an 18-year-old in 2024. And they're very different to what I was like when I was an 18-year-old. How do you think the generational change and having a good life, giving that information to an 18-year-old, I think they do need that extra help that maybe we didn't need, and maybe we'd have different resources.
I think I agree with you. I deal a lot with young people. I've done mentoring startups, gone to university, done women in tech, and I've had the whole spectrum. Spent a lot of time with students in universities. I've been very fortunate because it keeps me young, it keeps me on my toes. There are some incredibly smart youngsters, and I'm so jealous in many ways that they have all of these resources available to them that I just didn't have. I had to go to the library. The internet wasn't there when I was 18. So from that perspective, I'm super jealous, because I could do all this stuff, but 10, 20, 30 years younger. So I have a lot of respect for them, but I think they're under enormous pressure. Peer pressure, social media is a cesspool sometimes, and it's directed at that age group. So I have a lot of sympathy for them. I think they are under a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of influence targeted at them, and I think it must be just really difficult to you're trying to drink from this fire hose essentially, and education comes from every angle, and I'm not. It's really difficult. If you're looking to go to university, should I go to university? Is it an absolute waste of time? Should I just buy some courses on the internet and spend the entire time watching YouTube videos because I can probably learn as much? Those are really difficult choices, and they're tough to make. You have to involve your family, but you don't really want to be influenced by them. And then your family is from a different generation and they have a different thought, and there's all this mindset. It must be so hard. It really must be so hard. I have the greatest of respect and sympathy for the younger generation because, I'm not sure I would like to be one of them right now. I think they're facing a lot of tough challenges, but I'm very fortunate in the fact that some of them will approach me and say, "Chris, I've got this situation. What should I do?" And I can offer advice, and I can talk about some of the logic behind the decision making, and how things how they're being influenced and potentially manipulated. But it's tough. It's really tough. I don't feel as though I'm in a position to be able to give solid advice because the gap between us now, or the technology gap, the social gap, is so big now. I'm not sure I'm in a position to really, comment on this. It's so wide now, but I really do have a lot of respect, and they're
There's a productivity book called Make Time.
Yes, the guy from
there's a
from
productivity
Google,
book by
Zeratsky.
is it Knapp and Zeratsky, something like that?
Yeah. I've read it.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Knapp and Zeratsky, and they talk about these infinity pools that you can just lose your time. And I'm jealous of some of the information, but I'm not jealous of having TikTok at 14 or something, because I would have not come out the other side of that. I'd just lose so much time on that. It would be insane.
No, it was just the TikTok thing. I got reintroduced to Facebook 2 weeks ago. I took about 2 or 3 years off. It's just as awful as it was 3 years ago. So it's. But I have to use it. I have to use it for my new project. But that's not one I've missed.
It's almost a shame, isn't it? Social media's so ubiquitous that you can't get away from it, but how awful it is, and how sort of detrimental it is to so many things, but it's just a necessary evil these days.
Sadly.
Going back to the quick fire, so we may have covered it already, but what was your biggest light bulb moment where you learned something about yourself?
I think it's probably that minimalism point, sat in the study, just thinking, I'd read about it in all the books, but I got there myself. Is this it? I had everything theoretically that people strive for. I just wasn't happy. I was not happy at all. And it's I still read there are so many billionaires and they're really, really unhappy. So money, beyond that, I think it's what, £60,000 or $75,000 or something. It doesn't make you any happier, and I would totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. But I think to better answer your question, I've started all of these smaller adventures rather than these, get to this big realization of, oh my God, it's too late. And maybe that's because I had this kind of light bulb moment. But, this is why I did the meditation retreat, and, there's still bungee jumping to do, and there's other, adventures lined up, is to try and avoid that, having to make those really tough, hard decisions at that point, and just experiment, I think. So, that's my plan, is to put myself in a situation where, I have to fulfill some of these experiments, but it's sort of within my control. and then I can look at that experiment as a portion of that and go, okay, was this a good or bad thing? What can I learn from this? So that's my new strategy, I think.
What's your best and worst habit?
I'm the world's best or worst procrastinator at some point. I just used to really, really struggle, even last year. But this year I've said, motivation is a myth. You just have to sit down and do the work. And so I might not want to do it. I might not be in the mind to do it. I might not, expect that we've got to do some things that we don't want to do. But I specifically put myself in a position now where I have to sit down and do the work. And what's really interesting is that the more you do it, the less procrastination. It's like I was saying to my friend, I've achieved all of my goals for January, and I still managed to take 10 days of not talking to anyone. So I'm kind of at a good place right now. I just hope I can keep the momentum going into February and March.
Is there one part of the content creation that you actually don't enjoy?
Yeah, the ideas. I hate the starting and the ideas. And I think it kind of goes with. I wouldn't classify myself as an ideas person. I'm really good at execution, but I'm really poor at coming up with the ideas. My other half, on the other hand, is she can come up. We could put her on the spot, and she'd come up with 20 ideas that were really good right now. So I've leaned on her a bit. I'm not the ideas person. And so, I found getting started and all that big, it's a big task. The trick I've found is to break it down into really, really small parts and just do a very small amount of time. I'm just going to spend 15 or 20 minutes on this. I'm just going to spend 15 or 20 minutes coming up with a few ideas off the top of my head. I'm just going to spend 15 or 20 minutes writing some bullets on the first point. I'm just going to spend 15 or 20 minutes on the first paragraph. It's that you just have to break it down really, really small. In my case, I think maybe I'm a unique case, but I really struggle to get started on stuff. Once I've started, I find the momentum relatively easy to keep going. But yeah, so
okay.
Yeah, so I'm cranking out YouTube videos every Sunday now, which is unheard of. So.
Okay, how long are you going for? How long are the videos?
So my current adventure, the 50 and Fckd thing is YouTube videos every week. And we've done a couple of shorts that have been cut up as well. That's my plan for the year. I'm just going to put myself out there. I'm going to potentially embarrass myself. I'm going to potentially screw up in a few of these things. The first couple of hundred videos are going to be awful, but I'm going to keep going because I'm going to learn something that's going to be a good experiment. And it's another one of those adventures. Put yourself in that place of some slight discomfort and get on with it and see what happens.
I was listening to a communication expert called Ving, and he said this great thing that the cost of mastery is first you must be shit. And that's how it goes.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about Ali Abdaal, and he did that. He pulled that course together and said, "Your first 100 videos are going to be rubbish," and that's just the way it is. But during that 100 videos, you'll learn something. So yeah, there's a lot of good advice. I think it's
like with learning the language.
Yeah, it's I think we have an expectation that, to be successful at something is going to be really quick. But if you look at the very small percentage of people who have been really successful, they've taken 5 years, 10 years to do stuff. You just see the growth at the end. You don't see the 5 years of effort they put in to get all of the initial stuff done before you'd ever heard of them. So, yeah. I think we have unrealistic expectations.
Now you're standing on the shoulders of giants and you get to skip a couple of stages by doing part-time YouTuber academies and the like.
Yeah, and I think there are some wonderful resources out there. It's again back to that bit you mentioned about 18-year-olds and should we go to university is I look at people who sit in front of me and go, Chris, can you point me in the direction of some work? And I always ask them, what can you do? I'm totally uninterested in the qualifications they have. I'm more interested in what can they do, because those practical skills. And again, I think the teen and 20-something generation can teach people like me an awful lot about social media because they've grown up with it. Whereas for me, I had to learn it from scratch, and it keeps changing all the time. So, I think they are at an advantage in understanding, some of how to get social media to work for you. I have to sit down and do the research. Yeah. So there are, again, like I said, there are some very, very smart young people. We should not ignore what they have to say.
Right, a couple more quick fire to go, and then I'll let you go. But thank you again so much for your time today. What has been your best mistake?
Oh gosh, that's a really good one. It was a career mistake. I had a very big telecoms client. I was relatively new project management wise to that client, and they said, "Look, previous project manager, we didn't think the project was going to complete. We weren't confident that they covered all the risks. Can you replan it, but go into the detail and look at the risks and give us some good indication of what the timeline really is and what the effort really is and whatever." And I was young and enthusiastic and keen, and I went in and I redid this project. And I went, gosh, actually this project is a bit further out and needs a bit more resource and needs a bit more budget. But I was super confident that I'd done the best job that I could. And so I sat with the CEO and the head of operations, and we all went through the plan, and they questioned me and whatever. And I think everyone was confident that I'd kind of done my homework on this. We submitted it to the client, and the client went, "Yeah, you're right, absolutely right. We haven't got the budget and we haven't got the time for it, so we're going to cancel it." And I was absolutely devastated. It was to the point that the CEO phoned me up. I was in the US, the company was in the UK, and he called me up and he said, "Chris, I've got some bad news for you." And I was like, "What?" And he went, "That project you submitted, the client cancelled because you'd done such a good job." Yeah. So I think there's a lesson in that. It's, I put my heart and soul into that, and it was absolutely right as far as I believed. But I perhaps should have come up with but if you do this, or, I should have come up with a plan B. I think that maybe we could have, reduced the scope or done it in shorter phases, or perhaps been a little bit more creative in my planning rather than kind of taking black as black and white as white. So, yeah, it was a really valuable lesson to learn.
Easy in hindsight.
Yeah, but that's what experience gets you at that early point in your career. Is you learn really super valuable lessons that you are not going to forget going forward.
So if someone wanted to take one step towards living a good life, what would you suggest they do first?
Take a bit of time out. We've got plenty of time, plenty of space, and just reflect on everything that's going on in your life and everything that you want to do. And start to ask yourself some realistic questions about, is it really achievable? Do you really want to do it? Who do you need to help you do this once you've chosen? I've always loved planning. Always. I love planning actually more than I love the doing. But I still think it's a valuable exercise at any time, at any age, at any stage in your career, at any point that you're doing something. It's just, particularly when you're in the thick of it, it's just to take a little bit of time and stand back from whatever you're doing or from whatever you're planning or whatever you're thinking about in the future, and just reflect on, is it really the right thing to be doing? And, what should I drop? You can't do everything. start to think about other things that I can delay or potentially not do at all if I'm going to focus on, one or two of these super important things.
Okay. Who in your life should we talk to if we want to learn more about living a good life?
Oh, gosh. That is a superb question. I'm starting to think about, famous people, alive or dead. It's like the who, if you were to have a tea party and invite anyone, alive or dead, who would you invite? It's that sort of question.
You can have Muhammad Ali if you want. He's usually on the dinner table.
I was thinking of Einstein. He was, one of the smartest people on the planet. But he's the first person I would invite to a dinner, if you could invite people alive or dead, because this is the same guy who's quoted as, if you can drive a car and kiss a girl at the same time, you're not giving the kissing enough attention. And so you kind of think he must have been a super interesting guy. So for me, he would be the first person on my invite list. And so potentially, if you're extending your question to the alive or dead, he's someone I think who would be able to really tell you about what living your best life is, definitely. Is that an okay
Brilliant.
answer?
Thank you very much.
Really, isn't it?
No, it's fine. You're only the third or fourth person that I've asked it to, so we'll see where people go when I leave it that open for people to disappear. Well, Chris, thank you very much for jumping on the podcast today. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave our listeners with before we sign off?
You can follow me on YouTube. I'd love you to follow my Fckd and Fckd adventure. If you're of that age, I think it's kind of relevant. I'd love to see a bigger audience on that. But I write for my own fun. The Chris Wray blog, the two less things I haven't written on for years because I kind of got to the end of it. But I'm still a firm believer in the minimalism thing. I'm just not sure there's that much you can write about. I know some other people have, built careers and social media channels on it, but I think I got my point across.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I'll hit you up for all the links for everything that you're currently putting all of your efforts into, and hopefully steer some people to your channels. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Alex. It's super, super nice of you to invite me, particularly this early on as you're getting to know the ground. So thank you ever so much for the invite.